Unit 1, Topic C, Database Components. I'm opening the Northwind sample database, and we can start from here. The different components of a database are tables, queries, forms, reports, macros, and modules. For the purpose of this course, we will be focusing on the four basic components which are listed on the left-hand side here: tables, queries, forms, and reports. Now, altogether, those different objects form a database. And in order to explain what a database is, we need to consider typical uses of data in other applications. Let's start off with Excel. And most of you should be familiar with Excel. And Excel is what is called a flat file database, in which we have rows and tables of data. It is flat in the sense that it is very difficult sometimes in Excel to form relationships between different types of data. For instance, if an organization has salespeople and they have customers, then you might have two different sheet tabs in an Excel spreadsheet that contains the different customers and the different salespeople, but it is very difficult to identify which customers are serviced by which salespeople. In the natural world, there is always a relationship between the different components of the data that we manipulate. One customer might be serviced by 2 or 3 different salespeople, or a salespeople might have an area that contains 3 or 4 or 5 customers. So there's always a relationship between a salesperson and a customer. In a spreadsheet, that type of relationship isn't obvious. And the value that we derive from understanding and manipulating those relationships in a spreadsheet is difficult to create and manipulate. In Access, however, an Access database is a collection of data that is logically related and organized so that we can understand the relationships between the different types of data. In an Access database, for instance, it is quite natural for us to have a view of customers, which also shows us the view of the products that they purchase, or the salespeople that service them, or the geographic locations in which they find themselves. So Access is first of all a relational database and not a flat file database such as Access. And the power of Access comes from the ability to manipulate these relationships between data. The data in Access is stored in tables, and I am showing you in the Northwind sample database on the left-hand side the different tables that is contained in the database. A table is a storage container that holds a collection of related information. When we look at customers, for instance, we see that the table contains a list of all the different customers. It does not necessarily contain sales or product or order information. The information in a table is about customers or a particular topic. If we look at employees, here we find a list of employees. You won't see customers in an employee table because customers is a different type of entity from employees. Here is the invoices table, and invoices again is different from customers or employees. So in an Access database, the tables contain information that is grouped together, that belongs together. So that's the first and most important object in the database. The next object type is a query, and I'm showing you different queries on the left hand side from the Northwind sample base. A query is an instruction that requests data from tables. Another word for a query is a question. We have the ability and access to ask questions of the database in such a way that it pulls together data from different tables and presents them to us in a neat and readable format. Queries are mostly used in the relation between different tables. For an example, a manager might want to know who are the different customers that are being serviced by a particular employee or salesperson. And that sort of question is contained in a query. So we use queries to selectively take data from different tables in the database and present them in the form of a table or a form, and to give us an answer to a particular question that we're asking of the database. The next object type is a form. And forms are used to present data in a neat and readable format. For instance, there is a customer list form, which simply gives us a list of all the customers, for instance, in the Northwind sample database. Forms are used to both enter data, in other words, to present data to the database so that it can be captured. Forms are also used to display data, simply as a way to make the data presentable, to organize it in such a way that the end user of the database can look at the data and see that it looks, I'll say again, to look at the data in a way that is presentable, neat and easy to understand and read. The next object, and the fourth of the four important ones that we'll be dealing with, is reports. I'm opening skip that part, sorry. I'm opening a typical report from the Northwind sample database, and reports are ways, I'll say again, a report is a way of presenting information in a logical form. So a typical report might be of customers or of products or of sales in a particular period, and reports are typically the output from the database, where we use forms and tables and queries to put data into a database or to display the data on screen. Reports are typically what we get out of the database after we've asked particular questions from the database. Reports can be displayed on screen, or they can be printed on paper, or they can be presented in various other electronic formats.